Hi, everybody. I'm Sean Swindler with the Kansas Center for Autism Research and Training. And real quick, before we get into this great presentation, we're going to do a little plug for a study that we have going on at the Kansas University Center on Developmental Disabilities. And this study is really an opportunity for young adults who are interested with IDD and autism, who are interested in employment, to have direct access to some employment coaching and work on helping them attain that employment goal. And this is an evidence-based practice called the Self-Determined Career Design Model, the SDCDM, and it's really designed to work with young adults, again, with IDD and autism, to help them attain their career and employment goals. The innovative piece with this is that we're doing it virtually. And that's really a lot of the research we're doing is showing that this intervention can be successfully done virtually. So on the screen, you see we have listening sessions where if you're interested, you think you're interested in having your child participate in this, we would love to have you join us for one of these sessions where you can hear a lot more about this. Likewise, if you are work at a school or you work with people doing ABA and you have people you work with who you think would benefit from this kind of employment opportunity, then we would love to have you refer families to this. And again, we're looking for kids 16 all the way up to adults who have IDD and autism, who are looking for jobs or wanting to improve their career situation. So maybe a student is working somewhere part-time and it's time for them to start looking at how could we get them a more of a full-time job, or they've never had a job before and they want to start down that path. So if you're interested in this, please let us know. We'll make sure you all get the flyer that you see here. In chat, I'm going to put a link to sign up for these sessions if you're interested in doing that. So, so please just let us know. And if you have any questions, please get a hold of me or Dr. Evan Dean, who's on this flyer. And again, we'll send this flyer out to everybody who's participating today.
So what's the upper age limit on this?
It doesn't matter. We'll take anybody. So if there's a 40-year-old adult who with IDD or autism who is struggling, or we know some people have been employed a long time and lost their jobs due to COVID or downsizing due to COVID, this is an opportunity for them as well. And so please get a hold of us, and I appreciate being able to talk to you about this opportunity, and I'm going to turn it back over to Stephanie.
One last housekeeping thing before I turn it over to Dr. Zhang. If you have your camera on and the PowerPoint slides are down, I just want to let you know we are live on Facebook and your picture will show up on Facebook if you have your camera on. It won't if the slides are up. It only shows the speaker on there. But I did want to give you that heads up in case you did not want to be on there. If your camera is off, your name won't even show up on Facebook. So don't worry about that either. And then for those of you who are on Facebook, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat as well, and we will relay them to our presenters. Thanks so much. I'm going to turn over to Dr. Zhang and Dr. Heitzman-Powell.
Okay. We're going to get started today, and thank you all for joining us, and also from Facebook as well. So today we are going to talk about myths and facts about applied behavior analysis, or ABA. And Dr. Heitzman-Powell, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Linda Heitzman-Powell, and I've worked in the field for more than 20 years now. I started off with a handful of families, with my main interest being how can we work with families to be able to help meet the family's needs. So I started working in the field back before insurance coverage was an option for families for treatment. And what I found in my initial work was that you could have a child that was getting speech services, and as soon as you got a diagnosis of autism, speech services would stop because insurance companies didn't pay for autism treatment, and autism Speech delays were considered inherent in the diagnosis of autism. So, and the reality of it is I'm a parent first, right? Above all my little letters after my names. And it was untenable to me that families were having to struggle to find effective treatment for their kids. So that began probably a 15-year advocacy campaign on my part, where we tirelessly advocated for insurance reform, starting with being able to implement the early autism waiver in the state of Kansas, and subsequent to that, having the state employee health plan pilot project, and then more insurance reform from there. So, we're light years ahead of where we were 15 years ago, but there's still a lot of work to be done. So anyway, that's kind of who I am. Alice?
Yeah, it's always good to hear Linda talking about, her advocacy with autism treatment and insurance coverage, because definitely things have changed quite a bit. And so my name is Alice Zhang, and I have been working with Dr. Heitzman-Powell for several years, and I have a strong interest in parent training, and also using telehealth to reach rural communities and provide trainings to school and parents as well. So again, it's we are very happy to have you all here through Zoom and also through Facebook. And we're going to have a conversation about ABA.
So the first thing that I'd like to do is I'd like you all to type in your chat, what are some of the things that you've heard about ABA? We're gonna pause for like 30 seconds or so to give you guys all a chance to respond, and let us hear what you've heard about what ABA is. It is being recorded and it can be watched.
Yes, this is being recorded and will be archived out on YouTube on the Kansas Lend channel.
Thank you, Gail.
Yeah. We got the first response.
I'm looking for 19 more. And it would be okay for you to put in there nothing, right?
So Linda, we had a response on Facebook. It is covered now under all insurance, not just the waiver.
It is covered under most government regulated health insurance. So while people are typing in the chat, it is not necessarily mandated at this point for self-funded plans. And so what you need to figure out for your employer or your spouse's employer is whether or not it's a public plan, like a commercially available plan, or whether it's considered a self-funded plan, which means the company that you work for is the one that is putting up the money to fund their own insurance plan. For those that are self-funded, they're not always, they're not covered by the state mandate. However, some of them cover autism benefits and some of them don't.
Yeah, absolutely. There's still a lot of advocacy work needs to be done. And also, I guess most of the states in the United States, like Medicaid, do cover ABA treatment now, but there are several states that do not cover. For example, New York State, and I think Texas might be one of them as well. So yeah, there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, so so most of what you guys put in here is some of what we hear all the time, right? That it's intensive, it's regimented, it's repetitive, it's compared to like military boot camp, right? Where it's drill, right? You drill over and over and over again. And systematic, I like that one. It is very, very systematic, and that that we're The earlier applications of ABA, the more effective it is. The earlier kids receive treatment. So some of these are myths that we've heard. I've heard pretty much any type of criticism that you can hear of ABA over the last 20 plus years. And so hopefully what we're going to be able to do is talk a little bit about some of this tonight, talk to you about the myth behind it and maybe the facts related to it, give you a little bit more information about it, and then allow you guys time to ask questions. Okay, so really, like, looking at the fact that some of the ones that I've heard that were not in there is that it relies on punishment, right? That we rely on coercion, that we bribe our kids to engage in certain activities, right? And so there's a lot of different things that we've heard over the years, but the reality of it is that applied behavior analysis is just the application of the principles of behavior to socially significant issues. So what we're doing is we're taking the principles of behavior and we're applying them to areas or issues or behaviors or concerns that are important to that child and that family, right? Or important to society or the context in which those behaviors are to occur, like in a school setting, at church, on the playground, in a restaurant, at the dentist office, right? So what we're doing is looking at all those behaviors that have social significance, and we're using the science in order to be able to produce meaningful change in the life of that child and that family. All right, Alice.
Okay. So the first myth, I think, I feel like a lot of you already knew ABA and knew it has been around for a while, but there are some people say that ABA is a new treatment option, meaning that—
I'm going to interrupt for a minute, Alice. Sorry, like right off the bat, I'm interrupting you.
Yeah, go ahead.
But whether or not people think it's a new treatment option, just by virtue of the fact that some people have not even heard of it, you know, creates an awareness, a sense of wonder in me that after 60 plus years and all the advocacy work that I've done, that there are still families out there that have kids that are getting diagnosed with autism and they have not heard the term ABA before. So,
Yeah.
sorry for interrupting, go ahead.
No. Again, I just want to let everyone who is listening here right now to know that Linda and I sometimes will just chime in anytime. And so this is our style of presenting together. So again, the fact is that the foundation of ABA was laid out more than a century ago. So if you have heard the names of Skinner, if you know, when you were, I don't know, high school or college general psychology class, and talking about those, famous psychologists, and Skinner being one of them, they have been doing this kind of studies and laying the foundation of behavioral principles long time ago. So with the ABA in the 1960s, the therapists began to use ABA to teach skills that could include all the things that Linda has mentioned in terms of communication, social, community living, academic skills that are important to not just children with autism, but all the people who can benefit from using those skills. And additionally, ABA has been used to reduce problematic behaviors as well. So there are people who have very severe problem behaviors like, aggression, self-injurious behaviors, and all those things that are going to severely impact the function of that individual. So we, as ABA, we really want to use those techniques to address those behaviors that can improve the functioning of that individual so that they can, participate in the community and going to school, all those type of things.
So
Linda?
really, when we look at applied behavior analysis, like Alice was saying, behaviorism is the philosophy behind it, right? It's the philosophy of the science behind learning, right? Or what we call behavior. Then from there, we had the experimental analysis of behavior. And what that came from was the early basic research where we were looking at and identifying those principles that we talk about when we talk about applied behavior analysis and the basic principles of behavior. And then in 1968, here at the University of Kansas, as a matter of fact, some of the faculty member that were there at the time, Don Baer, Montrose Wolf, and Todd Risley, they published an article that said some current dimensions of applied behavior analysis. And that's where the term ABA came from, right? It's taking the analysis of behavior and applying it to socially significant problems. And so it's all based in that philosophy of, or the science of human behavior and learning. Next slide, Alice. And so really, what are those basic principles that we talk about? Really what we're talking about is reinforcement increases behavior. Just like when we're talking about, let's say you have a bridge and you put a crossbeam underneath that to reinforce the bridge, the intent of that crossbeam is to make it stronger, right? To reinforce it or to shore it up. So when we talk about reinforcement in behavior analysis, we're talking about strategies to be able to reinforce that behavior, to make it stronger, to make it more likely to occur again in the future, right? Because it's a behavior of social importance. The other principle is punishment decreases behavior. And usually when we hear punishment, we think, you know, this really terrible, awful, bad thing. And it is if you're talking about, you know, strategies that can harm, right? Strategies that can restrict movement, strategies that can bind or tie, or any of those other strategies that you can use to decrease behavior. We don't do that, right? But the reality of it is, in life, we all use punishment procedures. Every time you tell your toddler no, if they try to stick a fork in a light socket, you're trying to use a punishment procedure to decrease the future probability of that behavior. So the difference between how we as behavior analysts talk about behavior and how a lot of the rest of the world talks about behavior is that we talk about reinforcement and punishment in terms of the effect on the behavior. So if it's increasing the behavior or shoring it up or making it stronger, we talk about it as reinforcement. If the intent is to decrease a problematic behavior, or we're going to implement a strategy like response cost, right? You lose access to the car for the weekend because you had bad behavior, or you lose access to watching your favorite video tonight before bed. We talk about those in terms of punishment procedures, right? Because we're trying to decrease problematic behavior.
Linda, I want you to share the story that you always tell when you know, about your son. I think that's a perfect example to show, like, you know, punishment is not the form of what you use. It's
so
it's
not. So the story that Alice is talking about is, like I said at the beginning of this, I'm a parent above everything else, right? And so I'm a really huggy, touchy, feely kind of mom. And one day my youngest son, he was in middle school, and he asked me if I would take him to school. And I said, sure, honey, come on, let's go. And it was a bright day. The sun was out. The sky was blue. It was really beautiful. I was in a really good mood. I pull up in front of the middle school, and there's his friend standing there. I put the car, throw the car in park. I jump out of the car. I run around there to his side of the car. I give him a big old hug and a kiss. And I say, I love you. Have a wonderful day. Send him off to school. And he never asked me to take him to school again. Right? Now, you know, I say that because did I intend to punish his behavior of asking me to take him to school? No, I did not, right? I was in a really good mood, but the actual fact, if we're talking about it in behavior analytic terms, I punished his behavior because he never asked me to take him to school again. So my kiss and my hug functioned as a punisher for him. And so sometimes if we don't understand what we're doing, we can accidentally reinforce bad behavior, or we can accidentally punish appropriate behavior like I did with my son. So the difference between how we do it in the real world and how we do it in behavior analysis is we have specific terms that describe the impact on behavior, and those are the terms we use so we all know what we're talking about. The other procedure that you guys may or may not have heard of is extinction. And what extinction means, you're not adding anything to the environment, you're not taking anything away, you're just no longer reinforcing a previously reinforced behavior. So you have your child in line at the grocery store, and they're saying, I want a candy bar, I want a candy bar. And you give them a candy bar to keep them from being really disruptive. And so you're not embarrassed in front of everybody else in the line at the grocery store. And pretty soon it gets out of control. So now every time they start hollering, I want a candy bar, I want a candy bar, you just don't say anything to them, but you also don't give them a candy bar. And eventually that behavior will decrease and go away. So those are the 3 basic overarching principles of everything that it is that we do in our field. So next. So really, what is ABA? Just a little bit. This might be too much for you guys, but I had to put it up there because it was defined by Bear, Wolf, and Risley in 1968. Full disclosure here, Don Bear was my faculty advisor, right? So I learned from the man that developed this. And the basic tenets, there's 7 of them. So the first one is that it's applied, which means that the interventions that we put into place, the behaviors that we target, the skills that we target have to be socially important, right? It's behavioral, which means we look at behavior and how it occurs in context. So one of the things I love most about applied behavior analysis is it removes the value judgment. It's not that the child is a bad child. It's not that the parent is a bad parent. It's not that the teacher is doing a bad job at school, right? It's that looking at behavior in context and developing strategies for that behavior in context, and so that we can address a socially significant behavior. The other thing that I think that is significantly sets ABA apart from some other intervention strategies is that we are analytic and we are technological. Somebody had put in the chat systematic. That's where the technological part comes in, right? We are very systematic and we write out our treatment plans, our intervention plans, so they can be replicated by others. If I'm doing autism treatment and I'm the consultant and I have 2 or 3 different therapists working with that child, I want them all working basically off the same plan, right? The example I give here is that if half of you were to go to Walmart in Lawrence, Kansas and buy an entertainment center, and you took it home and you followed the instructions and you put it together, you would likely end up with a functional entertainment center. If the other half went to Ontario, Canada, to a Walmart, bought the same entertainment center, took it home, followed the instructions and put it together, you would end up with an entertainment center that looks like the one that was purchased in Lawrence, Kansas, right? So when you're systematic and technological about your treatment plans that you put into place, you're likely to produce similar behaviors. So next slide. The other thing is that the interventions that we put in place rely on science, right? So they're conceptually sound. They're built on the research that has been done in the field. And hopefully what they're doing is they're contributing to our further understanding of behavior and how it occurs in context so that we can continue to help other people at the same time. The Finally, it's effective. And we know that it's effective because on the previous slide, we know that it's analytic. So we take data on just about everything that we do, right? So we know we collect that data, we graph it, we review that data on a regular basis so that we know whether or not the treatment we have in place is working. If it is, great. If it's not the child's fault because they can't learn. What we need to do is change the way we're teaching the child so that we're teaching the child the way the child learns best. And then finally, generality. And this is one that I think in the current ABA climate that sometimes we forget, is that the behavior change that we produce in our learners has to have generality. It has to be able to occur across multiple people in multiple settings and maintain over time. So if you're taking your child to a clinic and they're working on saying please and thank you at the clinic, we also want please and thank you to occur at home. If we're going and if we're working in home and community-based services and we're working on appropriate social behavior like may I have it, here you go, or my turn, your turn, or conversation expansion, where else do we want to see that behavior occur? We want to see it occur at school with their friends, right? And so if it's not, then we're not doing our job. And we have to make sure that we put in steps and strategies and supports so that that behavior is generalizing outside of that teaching time. Next. I get really excited about the 7 dimensions of applied behavior analysis. All right, myth number 2.
Yeah, so the myth number 2 is that ABA is not a scientifically proven treatment for autism, which is totally not true. This is the one that I'm mostly against. So there has been significant scientific evidence backing ABA as an effective therapy for individuals with autism and other this type of disabilities as well, not just autism. So there are hundreds of peer-reviewed studies that have been published demonstrating the effectiveness of ABA. So here we should have already sent the handouts, the PowerPoint. So you would be able to click the links to go to some of the documents that we presented here. But I just want to let you know that there is a 2020 evidence-based practice for children, youth, and young adults with autism from the University of North Carolina. And they are the National Clearinghouse on Autism Evidence and Practice. And they reviewed articles. So they had a previous review from like 1990 to 2011. Mm-hmm. And then this year they did a review from 2012 to 2017. So together they reviewed 972 articles. So this is not the article, these are the articles that they reviewed and included and considered getting information from those articles. So there are more articles that may not meet their criteria. Anyway, so I'm not going to show you all the studies, but if you're interested in, you can follow those links and look at the evidence. And in those articles, the evidence-based practices, they may not call it directly ABA, but they may call it DTT, they may call it prompting procedure, all those techniques that are based on the science of ABA. So again, the fact is that we have a lot of evidence.
So one of the things that we know, that, the current problem that we're facing with autism is that by the time out of every 54 live births that are happening right now, 1 in those 54 live births will receive a diagnosis of autism by the time they are age 8. That's huge, right? And so treatment, intensive treatment requires 25 to 40 hours a week of one-on-one direct intervention, which has been, recommended by the Surgeon General of the United States all the way back to 1999. And that there's the Behavior Analyst Certification Board has come out with guidelines on the difference between intensive treatment, which is 25 to 40 hours a week, or there's targeted treatment. So maybe we have kiddos that are impacted that have more deficits in one area or challenges in one area than the other areas. So you can do targeted treatment, and that's usually somewhere between 10 and 15 hours a week, right? And the whole goal is that you do this dose, this intense dose of treatment, and you can move them up to the point where they no longer need such significant supports. One thing that, unfortunately, that the lack of information dissemination results in later diagnoses, lack of information for parents, and it all contributes to a lack of trained service providers. One of the things that I continue to say about that direct service provider, the one that's in the chair working with your child, is that, you know, if you go to get your blood drawn, you don't want to get your blood drawn from somebody that's never had to practice. And so make sure that the service providers that you're getting to work on your treatment team have either a good training program, they're qualified, or they're under the close supervision of an autism specialist or a board certified behavior analyst. One thing I want to say about this is that 25 to 40 hours a week, I heard a report on NPR, it's been several years ago now, but there was a research unit in Texas that was looking at spinal cord injuries. And they had two groups of people, those that got the 3 to 4 times a week of 45 minutes of therapy versus a group that was getting 40 hours a week of intensive treatment for a spinal cord injury. And out of those two groups, the group that had the 40 hours a week had the most regeneration of their nerve endings and produced better outcomes than the group that got the standard physical therapy. And so it's not just autism that intensity works. It's just that in autism, we've actually been better advocates, and the people that are the bestest advocates of all are the parents. So next slide. So what we do know that what's required if you're going to implement a program that is behavior analytic in nature is that you need to make sure that there's pre-service and in-service training for individuals that are interested in working with these kids. And so some of that's going to take advocacy, right? Sean knows all about the advocacy side of things. And that you also know, and the other thing to take into consideration is the difference between some of the other treatment programs out there and what we as behavior analysts do, because we use something called criterion-based assessments, which looks at individual specific skills that we can then target for treatment and do progress monitoring. And finally, making sure that we continue to use those empirically validated techniques that are based in the principles of science. So why use ABA? I keep saying it again and again and again. It's based in science, right? I say to people, like people will come and say to me, does ABA work for older people, older kids? And I'm like, we never stop learning, right? When we talk about behavior, we're talking about learning, right? We never stop learning. I learn every day. I learn from my kids. I learn from the parents I work with. I learn from the staff I work with. I learn from the internet. I learn from, you know, I just got a new front door put on and it's got a screen door attached to it. Every time I try to walk out the door and I forget to open the screen door, I run into the screen door. And so I learned from that encounter, right? To now stop and open up the screen door before I try to walk outside. And so we never stop learning. So does ABA work for older kids as well as it works for younger kids? Does it work for verbal kids the same as it works for nonverbal kids? It works for everybody. It works for you. It works for Alice. It works for Stephanie and Sean and me and everybody. So the other thing that I say is, because it is based on a natural science approach, I say if you stepped off a cliff and you were at the beach, what would happen? You would fall, right? Because of what? Because of gravity. And gravity is a principle or a law in science, in natural science. If you stepped off a cliff on top of a mountain, what would happen? You would fall, because gravity works the same at sea level as it does on top of a mountain. And so the science of human behavior works the same if I'm at home, if I'm at school, if I'm in a job setting, right? If I'm in a hospital, if I'm in a cafeteria or the doctor's office, the movie theater, it doesn't matter where you are, what behavior you're looking at, the science, you can bring the science to bear, right? And address that behavior as long as it's socially significant. So one of the reasons we do that is because one of the basic behaviors in our human repertoire is imitation. And so we learn socially. We look at somebody and we imitate what they're doing. Well, one of the areas that's really impacted in kiddos with autism is social engagement, right? That's social behavior. Our kids with autism do not often look at another person and use that as a learning opportunity and imitate their behavior. And so since they don't learn incidentally like that, we have to teach them how to do that. And as a goal of treatment, if we teach them to look to others as a way of making a determination for what the expected behavior is supposed to be, then we can teach them to go out and go to auditoriums, to go to pep rallies, to go to concerts, to go to movie theaters, to, you know, go out and be a social part of their social community. So it all comes back down to that social significance as well. And one of the reasons that we do repeated trials and learning opportunities comes back to the fact that our kids don't learn incidentally, and often learning's hard. And so it's our job as that interventionist, as that behavior analyst that's there working on the team, it's our job to figure out what is the way that your child learns best, right? And how can we get these repeated opportunities in there so that your child is practicing those skills, just like when you practice math facts. If I said to you guys, and you know, we were in a classroom together and I said to you guys, all right, ready? I want Coral responding. Everybody tell me, what's 2 + 2? In less than a second, you guys are all going to say 4. And the reason you're going to do that is because you practiced your math facts over and over and over again in school, right? And so the difference between that academic setting and what we do is we're often working on some of these social behaviors, right? But we do still need to practice them over and over again so we become fluent, just like learning how to drive a standard transmission car. All right, I'm done.
So another myth is called ABA is not based on real human experience. So I know that when like Skinner, for example, he did a lot of the lab using like pigeons. And we used to do, when we were in school, we used to have rat lab. So we teach, you know, rats to pick up a marble or push things around or all those type of things. So I think a lot of times that's why people think, oh, okay, maybe ABA is not designed for human. But the basic principle of ABA is that all behaviors have a beginning, middle, and end. And you know, you probably already heard about the ABC, right? The antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence. The principle is seen across all human behavior, and I would add it would sing across all animal as well. So it doesn't mean something that like an animal has that behavior, then that doesn't mean that we human beings cannot have that behavior, right? all that behavior principle that was generated from observation of animals in the lab that does not apply to human beings as well, because we also have done many experiments and many research with human behavior as well.
So one of the things that I want to say about that as well is Alice had mentioned Rat Lab, where you teach a rat to do things. And my 4-year-old helped me train my rat. And I trained that rat to count 12 marbles out of an array of 14, drop them through a hole in a sardine can, to climb a little ladder and pull a chain that drops something else on a trapeze that he could grab a hold of and swing over to the other side and climb up to the light and turn on the light so he could climb back down to the bottom of the cage and go all the way over and push the lever one time to get one food pellet. And I remember having kind of an epiphany and thinking, gosh darn it, if I can teach that silly little rat that's got the brain the size of a pea to do that complex set of behaviors, surely to goodness, and I was working with this little kid at a time that I was trying to get vocal imitation out of, surely to goodness I can come up with a strategy to be able to teach this little guy how to communicate, right? It's like, you know, the complexity of the human mind and soul and is so much greater than that little rat. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, how can I bring science to bear to address these socially significant behaviors, whether it be academic, whether it be activities of daily living, daily living routines, whether it's communication, right? Understanding, socialization, play skills, right? How not only play skills, but how do I be a good friend, right? What does it mean to be a friend? And how can I teach my kids how to be friends with others and teach their peers how to be good friends to them, right? Alice, did you include in the link to Autism Connections to show those little videos? Do we have that in here? Yeah, okay.
It's a little bit later.
All right, next slide. So when we look at this, people often think that you know, not that ABA isn't based in real interaction, but it also only works with you know, kids with, you know, it's only designed for that individual with autism. And really, we attempt to improve individual and social conditions across the board with different populations, right? Kids with IDD, without IDD, who need tier 2 interventions for academics, and those who are looking to become a better public speaker. We use it a heck of a lot in sports when we're teaching you know, kids how to play football or baseball or soccer, all those drills that they do with those kids out there, that's based in the science of human behavior, right? I was part of a study where it was a diet and exercise study, and the language that they were using when they were teaching me about how to modify my eating habits and increase my exercise behavior was all based in the science of human behavior. We use it when we teach parents. Like, I've developed a parent training program that can be delivered by a distance. It's called Oasis Parent Training, where it teaches parents the basic strategies that we talk about in the science of human behavior. We use it to teach teachers and staff across multiple settings and across multiple behaviors. Next. So oh, sorry, this is you.
It's all right. So this is one that I think one of or several of you mentioned. So ABA is nothing more than drilling exercises done at a table. I guess here, this sentence has two things, right? One meaning that we really practice a lot. Another thing is that we do that at the table. So I would say that, yes, we do practice a lot. So when ABA uses a wider variety of teaching strategies, and one of the most used strategies is called discrete trial training or teaching, so or DTT. That is the one that is often mistaken for drilling because it involves taking like a very complex skill and breaking it down into smaller discrete tasks that will be built upon to learn a more complex skill. So for example, when we teach a child to brush teeth, we're going to break that down into, unscrew the cap of the toothpaste, pick up the toothbrush, maybe put the toothbrush under the water, and then put the toothpaste on top of the toothbrush, all those each step. We're gonna really break that down so that it won't be such an overwhelming task. We're not gonna expect this child to learn all those sequences all at once. And we're gonna teach each step and reinforce each step when the child is learning those each step. And gradually we're gonna build them together and chain them together and make them an entire behavior where the child is going to be able to brush his or her teeth on his or her own. So, and that really takes a lot of practice, which is totally true. So that's why we all practice things, right? Like Linda was saying earlier about sports. How many times you have to practice to shooting a basketball, or how many times you have to practice running if you want to run a marathon. So practice really makes things perfect, and especially with our children who need a little bit more help, and who can now just learn by simply observing or incidentally. We really need to deliberately to teach those skills and practice those things. But at the same time, that does not mean we only teach our child at the table all the time. We use a lot of other teaching skills as well. So we do naturalistic teaching, we do pivotal response training. Sometimes you may hear the PRT. We also use this approach that's called verbal behavior intervention, that we really capitalize on the motivation of the child, their interest, what they want. If they want to, let's say they want to have bubbles, we're going to put the bubbles right in front of them. We're going to capitalize on that motivation to say bubbles, to request that. So we can teach that skill not only at the table, but we're going to teach that where that is appropriate, right? It's probably more appropriate in the play setting if we're going to teach that child to say, I want bubbles. Or we're going to put the child on a swing if we want the child to say, push me, right? So it really depends on what you want to teach your child. So table teaching with DTT, yes, absolutely we do that. But at the same time, we also do a lot of other teaching that is appropriate to that skill that we want to teach. So really the teaching methods that your child should be receiving or should be used with your child should be determined by your behavioral consultant based on the assessment that Linda mentioned earlier about what kind of programs or what kind of skills the child is learning and what are the learning goals. So if it's more socially related skills, that skill should be more taught in a more socially appropriate setting.
So this is one of my favorite graphics that I ever put together. And what you can do is think of applied behavior analysis as the umbrella. Yes. And the umbrella has different tines that come off of it. And each one of those tines is a part or a strategy that's under this umbrella of the science of human behavior or applied behavior analysis. But each one of them in and of itself does not make up the entirety of what we call applied behavior analysis. So most people think the arrow that is the second from the right, that's discrete trial. That is just one strategy or one teaching method within this broader umbrella of what is housed in the field of applied behavior analysis. Next slide.
Absolutely. Another one that we hear sometimes is that ABA trains the child to act without thinking, or ABA trains
That
the
they're
child
little
to act
robots.
like a robot, right?
Yeah.
So we hear that a lot. And what we actually does is that we teach children, we want to help them to practice and have enough repetition so that the skill can be reliably demonstrated in that individual's behavioral repertoire and when it's needed. So we teach the child to, put on their coat, and we practice. And when it's time to go home and it's time to leave school, the child is able to go pick up the coat and put the coat on without you asking the child, without you, you help the child that much. So really, when we teach the child multiple times, it's really trying to make sure that practice really help the child to be fluently having those skills. And also, all human beings learn by using some amount of practice, routine, and memorization, right? So that's called habits, right? We all have different habits. Like Linda mentioned earlier, that she has a new screen door, and now she used to have the habit of just go, right? But now she needs to learn by consequence, because she probably bumped her head or bumped some part, and then now she learned she needs to stop and then open the door first before she goes out. And then gradually, after she practices that long enough or many times enough, then she would not have to stop there and thinking, I need to open the door. She will just stop and open the door, right? That's the practice that can bring to that fluency. And then also here's just a prompt to try to get we all to think, or if you want to chat in, feel free to chat in as well. So just think about it. When you first learn to drive or to use a new device, like you got a new phone, a new computer, or you have the interest of starting to use Duolingo to learn a new language, what was that like? And also think about how you are driving right now. Do you think of all the things like, I need to first do this and then do that. I need to turn left, and before I turn, I need to look that way. You don't think about all those things anymore, right? Why? Because you practiced many, many, many times. So that's what we want our children to be able to do when they, the first day when they see their, peers, or when they, say bye to their teachers at kindergarten. That's what we do. Linda, you're muted.
I saw that, told me. So one of the things that is most reliably demonstrated in the field of applied behavior analysis, and we talked a little bit about it earlier, is intensive teaching, right? And so that intensive teaching is designed to provide opportunities for that practice. One of the things that we know about kiddos with learning disabilities or autism or challenges with learning is that where some kids in the general population, they do something 1 or 2 or 3 times, or maybe 4 or 5 times, and they learn it, right? It takes them maybe 20 or 30 times to become fluent at it, to where it's a habit. But our kids with autism or other neurodevelopmental disabilities, often it takes them 50 times trying the same thing over and over before they learn it, right? Or 150 or 75, or maybe some of them do learn it in 20. But what we do in our treatment for kids with autism is try to take all those different learning opportunities and scrunch them down into a shorter period of time, so that our kids aren't falling behind their same age peers, right? And so that's where you get into this concept of intensive teaching. And so in this, what we do, remember earlier, we talked about it as being systematic. So we identify the behavior or the skill that we want to target to increase. Then we define it, we want to do a preference assessment, right? We want to know where's that crossbeam that's going to shore up this behavior to make it stronger. What is it, like Alice just said, that's going to motivate this child to be able to engage in something that might be really hard for them, right? This learning activity. What is it that's going to be motivating enough that they're going to then do it? So think about it. We're teaching goal-oriented behavior. We're teaching first then. I'm going to work really, really, really hard. And when I work really, really, really hard, then this good thing happens, right? So we really want to focus on positive reinforcement. We call that contingency management. The other strategy that we use sometimes when there's a skill that a child is having a particularly difficult time doing it, we use this strategy called behavioral momentum. And so we're talking a lot about science. So another principle in physical science is a body in motion stays in motion. A body at rest stays in rest. And so think of behavior the same way. So we want to get a child to engage in this behavior, this particular behavior. What we want to do is we want to get them up and moving around and doing something. So in a preschool setting, it would be something like, okay, stand up, turn around, clap your hands, stomp your feet, now sit down. And so then all the kids sit down. Whereas if you just said, okay, class, time to sit down, the kids are likely, these little preschoolers, they're likely to continue running around, right? So we capitalize on the science. A body in motion stays in motion, a body at rest stays in rest, and we're systematic about how we use that to support the appropriate behavior. And then, of course, the PREMAC principle, which is a lot of people call this grandma's rule. First, you take the trash out, then you can go play outside. First, you do the dishes, then you can go hang out with your friends, right? First, then. And so they're much more likely to do the dishes if they get to go hang out with their friends than if you just say, do the dishes, and they, don't have anything to look forward to. So we call it grandma's rule. All right, next.
Yeah. So another all ABA programs are the same. Is that right? So ABA is a science of individual behavior. So again, we have emphasized many times that we want to make sure the programs that we develop or the behavioral goals that we choose are based on the assessment and also based on what the current skills that the child has. And sometimes that also includes what parents want the child to be able to do as well. Because, for example, sometimes I'm a strong advocate for toilet training or potty training, because I think that's a really, really important milestone to independence. But sometimes that may not be something that parents value or prioritize. Then that means we may not work on that right away compared to other skills that parents, value that more. So that's kind of how we really individualize the program developing for our children, based on assessments and also based on what parents prioritize as well. And also those goals and programs should be written and actively assessed or adjusted by your behavioral consultant in conjunction with the consultants of parents as well, because you are a very, very important part of the treatment team. Yes. That's how we consider parents. You are part of our team. And all the decisions that we make, we talk to you before we make the decision, we'll make the changes. And I think that's how it should be. So if you are not having that same level of involvement with your child's treatment or team, then, try to advocate for yourself. I know that sometimes it's hard, but I think we all understand the importance of parents' involvement.
So one thing before I talk about some of these other strategies is, if you remember, Bear, Wolf, and Risley, Some Current Dimensions of Applied Behavior Analysis, Don Bear, we were sitting in class one time, and he posed a question to the class. He said, let's say that you were called in to do a consultation for a family of acrobats. And they had a child that was minimally verbal. They had a lot of sound production, but a lot of aggression. And so you knew, because we know that problem behavior is typically communication, right? Their child's trying to communicate something. So let's say that you go in, you do your assessment, and you're pretty sure that you can shape those sounds up into functional communication pretty quickly, right? So you talk to the family, but the first thing that the family wants you to work on is backflips, because remember, it's a family of acrobats. And so the question Dawn presented to the class was, what do you teach first? And of course, you get a lot of different answers from a lot of different people. You have your specialists that say, oh, of course you teach communication first. And you have parents that say, well, I have to rely on what the professional's telling me. And then you have other parents that say, well, I really want to work on the backflips. And the answer that Dawn gave was, you work on backflips. Because by working on backflips, then you're addressing something that's really important to the family. It's socially significant for that family. By teaching the child how to do backflips, you're more fully integrating them into their family unit. And at that point, now you're demonstrating to the parents that they can trust you, because they now know that you take their voice into consideration when talking about their child, because there's nobody in the world that knows your child better than you do. And so I can come in, Linda Heitzman-Powell, BA, MPH, PhD, BCBAD. I can come in with all these little letters after my name, and I still do not know your child as well as you do, right? And so we're part of the same team. We're there. We're the whole goal is to, work on these socially significant behaviors, and you have a voice. So some of the other strategies that we use in our teaching, like that umbrella, is we do a task analysis, like what Alice was talking about earlier, where we take these really complex behaviors that it's like, holy Toledo, where do you start trying to teach this skill, right? And when you can break it down into those more manageable steps, then you can teach those skills one at a time, chain them all together. And now you have this wonderful little human being. I have to tell you a story, and I have to quit talking, otherwise we'll run out of time. I was working with this one young man, and he loved the weather. As a matter of fact, he's the little guy that I learned that our weather patterns start in outer space. Did anybody know that our weather patterns start in outer space? Well, they do. And so we were working with him, and all he liked to do is talk about the weather. He would talk about the weather. He'd talk about tornadoes. He'd talk about this. He'd talk about that. I'm sure you guys have all heard of token systems, where you have the board and the little tokens. Well, what we did was we drew a picture of a tornado, and we cut it up into 10 strips, and he'd earn strips of that tornado, and we got all 10 strips, and he could talk about tornadoes for 2 minutes, right? That little guy so this is like building, task analyses, complex behaviors, building on the kid's strengths. That he got older, he's now in about 3rd grade. He wrote an essay on weather for Fox News, I think it was, in Kansas City. And he won the contest. And he got to go on local TV and do the weather. And the guy at the end of it, he was just like, looks at him, and he's just like, and he walks off, because he was doing the weather so good, he didn't need the weatherman there, right? And I remember sitting there watching him, and I'm like, I taught him how to do that. I taught him how to do that, right? It's like you're looking at all these little pieces of this complex behavior that you taught individually, and then you put them together, and there's this wonderfully perfect complex little person there that's displaying all these skills. It was just like the most reinforcing, rewarding experience of my life. And so you chain them together, right? All these skills. You use prompting. We have verbal prompts and visual and physical. We teach our kids, and these are skills that we teach everybody, right? Like even college kids, we teach them how to do self-monitoring and goal setting. That project that Sean was talking about earlier in that they're working on, a lot of that self-advocacy group is goal setting, right? Teaching these individuals how to set goals and monitor whether or not they're reaching the goals to increase their ability to be independent. And then, of course, a favorite of mine is social groups and peer networks. How do we recruit our community of peers to come in and help be a support to our kids, right? So that then when we do that, we exponentially increase their learning opportunities. And so it is so important not to just sit at the table. It is so important to get out there and get into the community and foster friendships and peer networks and social groups to be able to help support our kids in different places. Renee Jameson has a great program at K-Med Center for young girls with autism and other neurodevelopmental disabilities called Girls Night Out. And she does that very thing with social groups and peer networks to be able to get young women so they can learn how to put on makeup, right? So they go out and they eat, they get in these groups. Sean, I don't know if the JCCC social group is still going on. Yeah. So Johnson County, Sean's been involved for a long time, and maybe, do you want to say just something briefly about it, Sean?
Well, Johnson County Community College has a social club for students on their campus who are on the spectrum. There are over 100 students on the JCCC campus who have an autism spectrum disorder. And so that club is a social club so people can, and it includes peer mentors, so people can meet one another, go to lunch with somebody, see familiar faces in the hall, and build that community of peer support. That's really so important.
Yeah, thank you. And so,
and we're meeting virtually until everything calms down. So
just like everything else, right? And that's some of what we did for some of our intensive teaching programs that had social goals in there, is we did online social groups via Zoom. So, all right, next. One of the other two distinct ways, the difference between some of the strategies that we use, and once again, I'm going to use that word systematic. There's two different ways that we kind of learn in this world. One is trial and error versus errorless teaching. And so trial and error is really how the world works. You like try to walk out your front door, the door doesn't open, you learn how to push the handle, right? You make mistake until you figure out how to do it right. Versus errorless teaching, which is typically what we use when we're trying to establish a new skill with our early learners, where we do a lot of prompting so that they don't make errors, because what we want them doing is practicing their the correct way more frequently than they're making errors. And so often what we do is we use most to least prompting so that our learners can come in contact with the reinforcer on a more regular basis. All right, next. So in addition to using errorless teaching, what we do is we use shaping. So shaping, by definition, is the differential reinforcement of successive approximations to target behavior. And so what you do is, if you want your child to say, I want a cookie, please, or may I have a cookie, please? You don't expect them to say, may I have a cookie, please, from the very beginning. From the very beginning, maybe all they can do is make the k sound. So they go, k, and you say, oh, you want a cookie? Thanks for asking. So you give them a little bite of cookie, right? Or they say, bah, and you say, oh, you want to play with the ball? Okay, let's play with the ball. And then, so eventually, once they get that sound, then you make them say, ba, for the ball. Say, ba, that's right, it's a ball. Let's play with the ball. And then you add the L on the end. So you're systematically shaping up the use of the entire word instead of just a sound. And you can use that with several different skills. Once again, you can use that within that discrete trial strategy, or you can use it during incidental teaching, right? Or during, like a lot of times around dinner time, right? Or meal time. Then we have incidental teaching. Once again, it's systematic. It's not just where you throw the skill out there and you hope that it works. It's like Alice was saying earlier, where if we want the child to say bubbles, we put the bubbles just outside of their reach where they can see it, so that then we capitalize on that motivation for them to say bubbles, please. One of my favorite ways is role plays. There's for me and a lot of people, there's nothing more significant. There's no more socially significant behavior for my kids than learning how to invite their friends over and have a little birthday party and open up their presents and have fun, right? That is such a social thing for those kids. Or at holiday times, if you participate in Christmas, opening up Christmas presents, right? Well, our kids often don't know how to do that, so we teach them how to do it with role play. The other thing that I've taught with role play before is trick or treat. So trick or treat only comes around once a year, but that doesn't mean that we don't practice trick or treat during treatment time as it's leading up to the actual event, so that we can teach our kids so that when it actually does come to trick or treat time, we can go out, we can be successful. We as parents aren't fighting with our child. We're not disappointed. The kids aren't stressed out because they practiced it in this role play so many times that now they're fluent at it. They can go, now they're getting their reinforcer, which is candy, and they learn that it's fun. So here are some different videos. That Autism Connections, I suggest that you guys go out and look at those. Those are really good videos. If we have time at the end, maybe we can, loop back to this and play them for you guys. But for now, let's go on to the next slide. And I'll try to quit talking so much.
Yeah, we're gonna just talk quickly so we can have time for some discussions and have some communication with you guys. So the last one I think is that ABA therapy is only for children with autism, and I think we have kind of touched on that, which is totally not true. So because again, ABA is a science of human behavior, so it can be applied and used with all different population, no matter their age or no matter condition. So there are successful ABA applications in nursing homes, in working with adults with dementia or with traumatic brain injury, all those conditions that can benefit from the behavioral support that ABA can provide. And also ABA can be used with organizational behavioral management. So there are Fortune 500 companies that use this. And another very important use of ABA or application of the behavioral principles is really reduce drug use there are many research programs and actual clinical programs that are built upon the principles of applied behavior analysis. So again, also we have education, no matter whether it's preschoolers, kindergarteners, special education, regular education, or higher education, we can all use applied behavior analysis. And then another very good use of applied behavior analysis is environmental concerns. So like, for example, I remember when I was at KU, we have a professor's, his research is about how to make sure that students in cafeteria do not put things that are supposed to be recycled into trash. and they like, bless their heart, their students, like their GRAs, like weighed the, actually collected all the trash and weighed them and see whether after intervention, whether they're like, students like misplaced of trash or recycled stuff actually decreased. So anyway, so there's a lot of application on that as well. And also like weight control, smoking cessation. Did I say that right? Anyway, you know what I'm trying to say. So there's a lot of application on this.
And so like Alice was saying, it's not just kids with autism, it's just any individual who needs help, right? It can work with autism, anxiety disorders clinically, like looking at language delay, disruptive behaviors often bring kids into treatment. I have really good stories about that if anybody wants to hear them. ADHD, we've taught kids to talk that have selective mutism, address learning disabilities, and developmentally delayed. So next.
Yeah, I think this is the last one, so we can get to the questions. So the last one is that ABA is harmful or uncomfortable for some children. So the fact is proper application of ABA really focuses on manipulation of the environment, not the individual or the child. We want to set up the environment for success. We want to make sure that we are making sure the environment is set up to the degree that supports the learning of the child. So for example, when you that apply, I just had a conversation with a parent. I was like, what kind of environment would support your learning? You want to be in a more, like I enjoy to be a more space that is closed. I do not want to learning in living room with the TV going on in the background, all those things, those type of things, or when someone is talking all the time. I was like, that's the same thing with how we set up the environment for your child when he is learning. So we should be setting up a table that is quiet for him. And there's not a lot of toys as a distraction. There's not a TV that he always wants to go back and turn on. So all those things, just an example of how we actually really trying to make sure we manipulate the environment to support the child, support the learning.
So, and the other thing is to understand that behavior occurs in context. And so anytime there's an interaction, which there is in treatment, there are two behaviors. There's the child and there's the environment. And me as a therapist, I'm part of the environment, right? And it's the relationship between the two. And so we need to be aware of our own behavior and how that's impacting the child. And we also have to be aware of the child and how their behavior is impacting us so that we can do what Alice said, which is arrange the environment to support the appropriate behavior. Because the whole goal is, and I mentioned it earlier, it's not that the child's not learning, it's that I'm not teaching the child how they learn. And so that is our focus as ABA therapists, that we arrange the environment to be able to produce better learning in the child. Next. And so the other thing that we do that's just a touch different is we monitor progress on a regular basis. And so we collect data and we do it daily, and we collect program data, and we collect incidental data, we collect skill acquisition data and data and data and more data. And so we have binders and data, and we're analyzing the data and we're looking at it, and it's telling us whether or not the child's making progress or not, right? And it tells us whether or not we need what we're doing is effective or it's not effective. And if it's not effective, then we change. And it's not a failure of me, it's not a failure of the child. It just means we're not teaching the way the child's learning at this particular point in time, or we're expecting too much out of the child. Or maybe we're not expecting enough and we're boring the child out of his gourd, right? So really the basic of what we do is data. You want to talk about the summary?
Yeah, so just a quick summary. Again, ABA is behavioral science. and it's a very effective and established treatment for autism and other population as well. Again, ABA treatment plan should be individualized for each individual, and can be applied to teaching at the teaching table, the kitchen, the bathroom, the classroom, the grocery store, the restaurant, any place you can think about. And also ABA-based teaching is fun and it's serious and takes effort at times, just like all the ways of learning and teaching, but just a little bit more effective, more evidence-based. So I think that's our last slide. And we have a little bit of resources here, and feel free to click those links. And I'm gonna get out quick the sharing, and we can have some questions and discussions.
Thank you, ladies. We appreciate that. Does anybody have any questions?
I wanted to pop in real quick. I asked the question about selective mutism. I'm a behavior consultant, and so I guess I'm just curious to hear how you've used ABA with working with students that demonstrate selective mutism. Because to be honest, I think about like a task analysis and how I would approach it, but I can't even imagine with selective mutism. So I would just be curious to hear.
Well, what the thing that we did with selective mutism is that we looked at environmental context, the conditions under which it occurred, the conditions under which it did not occur, which are just as informative, right? And then using shaping, differential reinforcement of successive approximations to a target behavior, and systematically shaped it up. So if if you want to talk about it, I can talk about some of the different, like maybe offline, right? I'd be willing to talk to you about it offline, talk to you about some of the different programs that we put in and how we systematically shaped it up with differential reinforcement, right?
Awesome. Yeah, I was going to say the main thing I've used has been more related to social groups and this would be more with like elementary age students, where you'd find those couple of kids that they would kind of talk with. And so we did more social grouping in that way to encourage more conversation without reinforcing, oh yeah, you're talking. And so I was just curious to see what else, but yeah, I can definitely reach out to you.
Yeah, because so if you think about it and you think back to the 7 dimensions of applied behavior analysis, what you're kind of talking about at the same time is generality. That what you want to do is generalize that behavior from those peers that this kid will talk to those that he or she currently does not talk to, right? And then what are some of the different ways you could do it, like pairing, right? You could pair this child with this child and then generalize it to this child and start to expand his frame of reference. So
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Anybody else have any questions tonight? I don't think there's been any on Facebook.
Oh, come on, guys. I like to talk and I have 7 minutes left.
Yeah, we rushed our PowerPoint so we can have some time to talk. Like,
okay, I'll ask a question.
Okay.
So you have a waiting list, correct? Do you have a waiting list for kids to get in? What's that waiting list?
It kind of depends on the child, the area, the age of the child, and so it's not a yes, we have a waiting list, right? It's once again, it's pairing what's available. But if you reach out to us, do we have our contact information on there, Alice?
Yeah, I think I believe
Yeah,
we
did you
put
put our emails on there?
handout.
Okay, yeah.
I think
if you reach out to us,
no, we have your contact information. We just have heard you've had long waiting lists, so I think we shy away, but I think we should just kind of approach you with what's happening. I'm in birth to 3, and so we get kiddos that are diagnosed at 2. And so they're just
Oh,
really
yeah.
searching. And then the other one was, would this be a good video to show parents? I know I saw you recording it. It'd be a great place to like show parents and let them watch this and learn, because I've heard you speak before, and it's awesome, but should be great for them to be able to hear this information in their own homes. I mean, what do you think? Is this?
Maureen, this whole series and session is designed specifically for parents. So I would say absolutely share it with parents. You can find the link on Facebook at the Kansas Lend page, but then we also have a YouTube page, and I will put the link in the chat. But if you just go to YouTube and do Kansas Lend, you'll see all of our past videos from video sessions from when we were in person to now.
And
This
Maureen,
one may, just an FYI, this one may not get out until Tuesday when I'm back in the office.
and
So.
Maureen, Alice put a link in there, and I think she may have sent it out. There's a wonderful parent handout that is on, I thought it was Chapel Hill. Is it Chapel Hill as well?
No, it was Autism New Jersey. I think that was one of the handout that was sent out.
It is a great handout for parents. As a matter of fact, when parents come into K-CART there at K Med Center, that's one of the books that we give them, right? Because it explains what ABA is in parent-friendly language. And the other place are those videos that we didn't show on the Autism Connections. Those are parents. Those are real parents, and they talk about ABA. They talk about what it felt like when they first were diagnosed. It shows examples of parents teaching kids to eat tomatoes, how to prepare for a birthday party. It's great, and they're free. The resources on there are free. And those are also things I would share with parents.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Linda, there's another question in the chat. I'll go ahead and read it for you. My son was in ABA for 11 months, then I pulled him out because of the pandemic. Once things get back to normal, would it be beneficial for him to start ABA again? He is almost 5.5.
Yes.
Yes, I agree.
For someone who loves to talk so much, I can't believe that was such a quick and short answer, Linda, but I knew what it was coming.
It absolutely would, because we have kids. Unfortunately, sometimes I have children that don't start treatment until they're 7, 8, 9, 10. I've also had like kids coming in at 11, 12, and 13, right? The earlier you can, like, remember earlier I said a lot of bad behavior serves a communicative function. If we don't teach our kids how to request appropriately according to social standards, they're going to use their behavior to get their wants and needs known, right? And remember that the more we do something, the more we develop habits. The more they use their behavior, the more that's going to be a habit for them. And everybody knows how hard habits are to break. So the older they are, it's harder to break that habit of using that bad behavior in order to be able to teach more socially appropriate ways of getting your wants and needs met. And so the sooner that you can get that kiddo back in there, that absolutely better it's going to be. And it doesn't mean if you don't get them back in within the next 6 months, it's, you know, it's not a make or break, but I would view it as a priority, yes.
And also I would say there are center-based services, but there are also in-home services as well. So that's a conversation that sometimes I have with family because they're concerned about COVID, sending their child to a center-based program. So I would just say, like, you know, consider other options as well to have that service.
And also there's the we do serve Spanish speaking kids, especially with parent training. And I was going to talk a little bit about that parent training as well, because our OASIS parent training, and we've got multiple, not just at K Med Center, but we're actively teaching people how to use OASIS, right? And it's a billable service. So you can, it's 97156, the parent training code under behavior analytic services, right? That you can bill, and you can do OASIS parent training with the families, and it teaches parents the basics. It teaches them how to observe behavior and define it. It teaches them how to identify what's motivating at that particular point in time, how to identify a skill that they want to use on, and how to use contingent reinforcement to increase that skill, right? So it teaches the parents the basics. So not only can they, like in the presence of a pandemic, be able to like take over some of the work with their kids themselves, but also how to augment the treatment team, right? And how to, and the way I always say it, because remember I say I'm a parent first, it puts parents back in the driver's seat. Like we have parents as teachers, right? It's because parents are teachers. We teach our kids. Well, when you have a child with autism, sometimes you feel like you're no longer in the driver's seat because you don't know how to deal with this unique little human being. And if you learn some of these basic strategies on how to do it, it's like it builds your confidence back up. I know how to do this. I now know how to be a better parent as a teacher for my child with autism, right? So the other thing I would explore for people that have maybe been delayed because of the pandemic is reach out to us, and we'll see if we can't get you connected with an OASIS parent training coach somewhere, and that can all be done via Zoom.
Yes.
Great.
I just did one before this.
Well, we have come to the end of our time, so I want to thank Dr. Zhang and Dr. Heitzman-Powell for joining us tonight and sharing their information with all of us. I want to thank you all for joining us. This has been a great group. And our next one is February, I believe, February 11th. Yes, February 11th. And we don't have all the final details yet, but it should be on grandparents. So get some information for grandparents out there in the community. But thank you again.
Grandparents need OASIS too.
Yeah, grandparents, yes. A lot of grandparents are taking care of their children, grandchildren nowadays. So that would be great. But again, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. We will be sending out the post survey after this is over. Thanks so much. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thanks.